This is a conversation that we do for the Infravision Foundation, the Infravision Conversations. And thank you, both of you. You've done a remarkable study of FSI deregulation in Hyderabad, sitting in Melbourne. But obviously, you have a very sound grip on the issues in Hyderabad, because it's been very well received. So thank you so much for the study.
We actually were in India at that time, so we were in Hyderabad, and then we did it in Hyderabad only. The actual writing we did in Melbourne, but the field work, of course, happened in Hyderabad.
Yes, so, that's why it's such a solid piece of work. Thank you. Obviously the first question is, what really went wrong with the deregulation in Hyderabad? Would Dr. Tirumala like to take that up?
Yeah. So we can't say something went wrong actually, but the question is, since 20 years since the time they actually started doing this deregulation, and then we are kind of assessing it in one sense to see what actually happened 20 years down the line. So any deregulation of FSI, when they did, the expectation would have been that they would have had a uniform growth across the city. But unfortunately that didn't happen. It was, it's not unfortunate in that sense, I'm probably using the wrong word, but the market so determined that some areas are more favorable, some areas are not so favorable. So, and also the infrastructure did not go hand in hand. Whatever areas they picked up in Hyderabad, the western side, where you had a high FSI, 4+ average of FSI, whereas the rest of the city has 1.5, 1.2, 1.6 kind of ranges. I think that is a missed opportunity is what I thought. It's they could have actually went through with infrastructure development in the same way where they had, and they can directed the FSI that way. Probably that is where I thought the Hyderabad probably lost one opportunity. But of course, the state went through so many changes after that. I'm sure FSI must not have been high on the priorities. The Telangana formation, everything would have happened so much. So I think the priorities got changed. But yeah, Piyush, you have something else to say on this?
Yeah, I'll take more philosophical kind of perspective on this one. So I'll possibly quote Louis Mumford, who was one of the very important urban planner in the 20th century. So what Louis Mumford said is still relevant. He says that cities function as a theater for social actions, and where different stakeholders, they can maximize their potential, but city has to create a stage where all these social actors will act. Now, I think when we look at the Hyderabad's experience, where city was trying many things, there were numerous infrastructure projects. The SEZ was being promoted in a big way. There was a new metro line coming in, new IT park was being developed. And then FSI was also one of the important instruments that the government used. Now, then another thing, which I'm also an economist, so bringing Keynes and Hayek's approaches become quite pertinent in this case. Hayek's approach is more market-oriented. He says that let the markets function, and market as a social institution will create outcomes which are the most efficient. While Keynes says that the government has to take the lead, and the government investment would then spearhead the economy and everything else. Now here, I think Hyderabad, given that when this was being proposed was Chandrababu's government at that time, and they were very pro-market, and they went with those market ideals and ideas and let the market function kind of approach. So FSI was deregulated. And then obviously the consequence of market is market also has a perverse incentive, which is essentially a kind of development that will be more maximize the profit kind of development that would happen, and that's what probably happened. So more attractive areas where, as the report says, that the values were higher than the cost of building. As you go high, the cost would increase, but the values have to hold that. Those got developed very quickly. You can see that development happening, but other areas did not. While on the other hand, the approach, whether that is good or bad, is always a questionable. Markets cannot function in isolation. So the government regulations and government structures have to support that, wherein probably black and white kind of approach would not have been very favorable at that stage. The government should have created other mechanisms through which, like as Raghu was saying earlier, the infrastructure and so on, and the regulation should have accompanied those infrastructure growth in areas. That would have been probably much more sounder approach.
Let's talk about that. In fact, that's something that is of great interest to the Infravision Foundation as well. The idea of the Unified Metropolitan Transport Authority, for instance, that's one way of regulating transport. Or the idea of, what Bangalore has done, the Greater Bangalore Authority, split the city into 5 different municipal corporations and seen whether that works out better in terms of urban governance. What kind of regulation should have accompanied this particular tool, as you say?
See, the idea of any FSI is that you are allowing more space to be built. Can be vertical, can be horizontal, but obviously you go vertical to the extent feasible. Once you go high, you are expecting that more people will stay and there'll be more movement there, and which obviously means you need more services. You need water, you need waste management, stormwater, etc. Now, the question is, when there obviously is a policy lax, you do some instrument, like say FSI, you deregulate in 2004, then is there a simultaneous movement on the other aspects of infrastructure? Was there a project which is prepared for improving the water supply? Was there a project which is prepared to clean up the waste? They did that, but is it targeted in a sense of? So it's not going hand in hand. Unfortunately, or the tools like the impact fee or a betterment levies or etc., various mechanisms which government has in their hand, ideally should have gone hand in hand if we are doing one instrument. Now, it is not possible once you have a very decentralized or more each agency doing its own kind of respective jobs. A unified authority probably has a chance to bring together kind of activities like this. Now, Bangalore went through a different case, and they were 8, then they merged it to become 1. Now they are trying to slice it again into 5. So it depends on what works, what doesn't work. Now, there are always debates on whether one approach is better vis-a-vis the other approach. Obviously, a coordination is important. I mean, urban cities of late, at least particularly in the last 10 years or so, the way what we are seeing, it's no longer the old style development of I say something and it will happen that way. The markets are behaving the way it is, and the policies are doing differently. Then the idea is that should we go tandem are you going to move in sync or not? I think that is a problem in infrastructure here. Whether unified authority will solve is again the question of who is going to control, how are they going to get together. It's a systemic infrastructure. I think the systemic governance systems itself, I think, is a challenge in India.
That's true. Professor Tiwari, you'd like to weigh in on this as well?
Yeah, I would like to add, besides the Bangalore example, probably Delhi is another example where MCD split into few, and then again they are looking at reconsolidation of the whole thing. So I guess the challenge is that a bigger authority with multiple function housed in a single authority is much better than having many authorities who have to coordinate action in some way. And cities are like small cells who come together and form a bigger structure which works as a unified whole. And that is the most important thing here, that there is authority which is unified, which brings together all the function and has an oversight on different actions that happen in city is much better. Now, coming back to the other one, whether let's take an example. If you leave it to the market purely, and if you are developing, say, a metro rail kind of infrastructure, the market will provide those corridors where fare box revenue is it reaches the break even, not those connectivities where probably the fare box revenues and other revenue items don't make sense. So in that sense, what would happen is that market would leave out affordable housing, market would leave out connecting those areas where inequalities or marginalized communities live, and so on. So there is definitely a holistic picture which connects these different elements, and the actions that are taken address some of these things will become much more important. So that would have been, first of all, have a unified authority, and second thing is that there are different functions that should be coordinated in a way that results in a better performing city.
Again, that's very interesting because the Hyderabad Metro is a unique metro in India in some cases because it's a public-private partnership, and L&T has done a lot of good work there. But the issue there is that they feel that it's an investment that hasn't really come through because they've not made a profit, and they don't see themselves making a profit for a while now. So that's the point you're making, that when the market is the predominant force, then profit becomes the predominant motive. So could there have been another way that the Hyderabad Metro could have been run? And could it still be done, in fact?
We didn't go into Hyderabad Metro case in detail in this particular study, but obviously it's a point of interest for us. It was earlier Metas, of course, before L&T took over. Then Metas, for whatever reason, went off. Then L&T bought over. And as you said, is one of the unique PPP models where you are depend heavily on the real estate revenues, apart from on the fare box. Now, I don't know whether you got a chance to go and see the Hyderabad different places, but the way they have done the metro is that every alternate or every third stop, you have a kind of a mall attached to a metro station. Okay, and then you expect that the footfalls will increase because people will go to a mall and will use the metro, and that was the intention, and they started off with that. There are 2-3 things which happened simultaneously when the metro is being built. If you sit back and see on hindsight, one, of course, the roads started improving a little bit. Even now, roads definitely on that particular corridor is not a replacement for the metro. Metro is definitely way faster on that particular stretch. But unfortunately, COVID also came in at the same time. It completely killed the retail market in most of the places, and then Amazon e-commerce picked up. So their fare box on the retail revenues, the real estate revenues kind of tanked for Hyderabad Metro, which they were not able to make up. Now, if you go onto the train, they still run with the 3 carriages. It's like jam-packed. You can't have it's more worse than a Mumbai local in terms of the traffic there. And people actually now go the other direction to catch the train. Like, for instance, the train is terminating in one place, in the Raidurg, which is IT center. People board the train other side 4 stations, then go all the way, then come back. Then only there's a likelihood of that you'll be able to stand, not forget about sitting. So it's so bad as that. So it went off in a different direction, but it's a question of when you use a real estate as a revenue mechanism or a viability gap equivalent for infrastructure project, the question, when does it actually work? Real estate plays like equity. It comes, returns at one point of time. It doesn't. So I think that's a problem there in terms of using real estate to kind of pay it out. Will FSI actually help in that area? Probably not, because they are getting into some of the areas where there are certain regulations on FSI. You can increase there, but intention again was not an FSI. It was more a real estate revenues which are there in that area.
Professor Tiwari?
Yes. Yeah, can I add one more element? And I will take the perspective from the point of view of it's a public transport solution for mobility. Now, usually you would expect the middle income groups would probably use this, and that's how the fare box revenue will come in and everything else would happen. So what happened with the metro is that the property prices around those metro corridors, they increased substantially. And what that then led to is a phenomenon of gentrification, which means that once the prices went soaring high, people who could afford, there were 2 things. Those who were living there, they saw it as an opportunity to benefit from that real estate gain. So they sold that real estate and moved to other location because it was monetizing their illiquid asset. And on the other hand, people who could afford that were the ones who were not the middle income groups anyway. So they started forming new clusters and new hubs of their residences who would not depend on metro but rather depend on car for their mobility. So it defeated the whole purpose. And how it could have been better leveraged is by capturing that value gain that was happening to the real estate abutting those metro corridors, wherein there was no real instrument that we saw that was proposed in order to capture that. It could have been either through land taxes or some sort of other mechanism, but those value gains which were created because of the public infrastructure development should have been captured for the public benefit, which didn't happen.
And in fact, that is the issue with most of these cases, right? The land value capture or creation, whatever you want to call it, doesn't happen in an effective fashion. And as you said, Dr. Tirumala, it becomes a missed opportunity. So what is the option now that we've assessed it, now that we know that, these are the issues that have come up? What are the things that can be done now with the benefit of hindsight to improve the infrastructure in the city?
FSI is as a process now, it's 20 years since they've gone this direction, and the erstwhile Andhra Pradesh and now the Telangana and Andhra, they have been quite innovative in terms of how do you use land, how do you use activities. I'm not saying it's right or wrong what they've done so far. It's just a question of how the market actually played out in the last 20 years is probably not what they expected when they started off with. It doesn't mean that they're wrong, or it doesn't mean that their objectives are not fully met. Obviously, as I said, the state had a bifurcation and they had different issues there. The Telangana government seems to be happy with the kind of revenues what they are getting so far. That's the feeling I got when we met various stakeholders. But one thing which stood out very starkly for us is that what is known as the circle rate and what is the market value, they are not actually matching. They are not going in tandem, and that is a big element which probably can be plugged, and that will increase the government revenues quite a lot. So now that the state has gone this direction and Hyderabad is seeing the growth in certain pockets in the city where there's substantial increase in real estate activity, as soon as quickly they can get the rates matching between circle and market rate, there'll be some chance of making up more revenues. Now, the government obviously made a statement somewhere through saying that the objective is not just revenue, which is fine, which is not just the revenue, it's also how you see the growth over a period of time, and then how do you ensure that there's a uniformity. Those objectives also would need to be met. But updating circle rates more frequently, which other states do, unfortunately Telangana didn't do it. That's one. More importantly, how do you link a FSI benefit to a public outcome in terms of better infrastructure, better affordability, etc. I think that's one probably they can start looking at going forward. Also, the targeting FSI spatially. I mean, where do you want to do that? It's currently they are done on the western side, but the growth corridors now they are having a rethink on the outer ring road, which is coming, the other one ring road which is coming up now. It's still going on different directions. So, if they want to target something, can they tweak around the incentives differently? That's one area which they can do. You spoke about the unified authority, but better transport governance, etc. Again, linking up all these things gives not. They have the foundation now. So once you have the foundation, how do you get the other elements in place? I think these things will probably help the city to kind of leverage on what they have done so far, and probably move to the next phase.
Professor Tiwari, what's your view on this?
I agree with Raghu that all these instruments have to be coordinated with other institutional and governance reforms, and they have to be integrated together for better outcomes. I would also like to give an example, like does FSI deregulation would necessarily result in a different kind of city? than if it was, say, heavily regulated? The answer to that probably is not. We have the example of Houston, where the FSI was deregulated, like in Hyderabad, and there is another city which is heavily regulated, like California. I think in terms of the city development and city scape, they're not any different. You would not have expected any different. So what is interesting and important here is that when we are looking at, say, using some of these land-based instruments, they cannot be used in isolation and expect them to kind of result in an outcome that will change the whole city space. That's not going to happen. So we have the pockets where informal housing is there. We have pockets where low-income households live. We have also pockets where younger generation live or other marginalized community live. They all form part of the city, and they have all to play a role. You cannot have only high income housing where somebody who works as a maid cannot come, or she has to travel, let's say, 2 hours in a bus, and the metros don't connect there. The last mile connectivity is also not there. So the city has to work in tandem, and for that we have to create, or we have to bring together all these different instruments, which will be market-based instrument and also, let's say, public authority instruments to work together to create a solution. And I think that's the step which I think Hyderabad would have to think, that they cannot just depend on one instrument, but bring together various other instruments and then look for a solution that works for the city.
That, of course, would require complete change in the way the city is governed and the way the city is thought of as well, which doesn't necessarily happen in India. I think urban governance is really the last outpost of political power as well. So I think it's something that people don't necessarily want to give up. And Hyderabad is an interesting city in the sense that it is both a heritage city as well as a hugely modern and modernizing city. Both things are happening simultaneously. And I wonder what you think of, how one needs to govern a city like that.
In my opinion, Hyderabad has been at the forefront of reforms all the time. Like, for example, when you look at 1990s and that post-1990s era, when the liberalization has just taken off in the country, and Hyderabad was taking a lead with the great institutions like ISB being invited to set up their campus there. When the SC jets were being proposed, the Hyderabad took lead in all those. When the first green building came up, that came up as an ITC building in Hyderabad. So Hyderabad has that progressive approach to development. And given that the way they started the public-private partnership in metros, while Delhi was largely a public-funded kind of a metro project. So Hyderabad has shown the resilience as well as approach towards development. And I think if any city in India that can do, it's the Hyderabad.
See, just to add, I come from Hyderabad, so I know this. I've grown up there, so I know that area.
Understand it, yeah.
So the two parts what you're speaking of, what we used to call old city and the new city equivalent, but the things have changed substantially there in terms of the movement between the two places. It's not that it's kind of the good things about both areas kind of percolated to other areas. The friendliness which is there in old city, the camaraderie, the kind of festival celebrations, what happens in the old city kind of percolated to the new city. Still you can see a lot of activities happening there, but also the modern stuff which is there in the high-tech city side or the Raidurg and the western corridors, that has gone to the old city as well. But they're still maintaining their identities in that sense. The governance that way is not, because the movement is there and people do work across regions, it's not that the styles of government need to be different in both areas. The people are the same end of the day. When you do have a lot of influx of the being a state, being a city, state capital, you expect a lot of migrants to come in, and that's happening in every city, and Hyderabad is no exception there. You see quite a few people who are coming in there, but they are kind of Hyderabad is one city which is welcoming of everyone, so there shouldn't be a problem there. But I don't see there's a need to do differently in two different parts of the city. It's just a question of how do you actually improve these services. But as I said, these are the spatial tools. When you have a FSI or you have a betterment levy or infrastructure action which is going on in one area, can you support the other elements which are needed to ensure that the growth and the ease of public living doesn't actually collapse anywhere? And that, I think, is a bigger challenge than a style which needs to be changed between two different regions in a particular city.
And Hyderabad is mercifully also bereft, as of now at least, of the real ills that are besetting our other cities. How has that managed? How has the city managed to do that?
I don't know whether you can say that because the traffic is bad. I can't drive as easily as I can drive.
People, of course, will compare it to Bangalore and Gurgaon.
Yeah, I lived in Bangalore as well. It's there. See, I mean, it's still it's been always a city of multiple cultures, city of various people, and much narrower in most of the areas. It's not that city is wide. I mean, unless you go to the peripheral areas, the core city is always very narrow. Difficult to manage the traffic, the issues of solid waste, etc. But as Piyush mentioned, they have been doing reforms quite a lot. I mean, one of the earlier, the citywide PPP for solid waste management, one of the first one under JNURM went there. And so many activities they have been doing. I think it's just the culture and just the period, over a period of time, what actually transpired there. I think they also were kind of blessed with good leaders over a period of time. I mean, right from Chandrababu Naidu or before that as well. And then subsequently, once someone creates a step, you can't go back. In Indian politics, I think that's a good thing. Whether you do or not, city will move forward. So things will happen. So I think that actually played to the advantage of Hyderabad for some time. I don't think they did anything substantially different than anywhere else, just that they built upon their culture, and because they had the practice of doing so many reforms, for instance, the land pooling, which picked up in Gujarat, but Hyderabad, AP does quite a lot of work there. So those kind of activities, I think they kind of triggered and put in place all over the place there.
So, Professor Tiwari, what are the lessons one can learn from the way Hyderabad has somehow managed itself, despite all the flaws?
Right. Okay. So I will go a little back, say 2005, 2006. And at that time, Hyderabad was taking a lead. It was ahead in doing reforms. And then the city followed it. Like, for example, when the whole SEZs were being developed in Kokatapalli and all that area, and then high-tech and that whole corridor, outer ring road was being built, new airport was coming up. So city was one step ahead, and then rest of the city would catch up in terms of its growth and all that. Now what has happened is that when the reforms of the recent time, like, for example, the development of metro, of course, the development of metro can only happen in the areas which already exist, but they should also expand this to those new growth areas very quickly. And those kind of things have to, again, done in a very systematic and coordinated manner, thinking one step ahead. How do the governance or the policymaker visualize which direction is the city going to grow and where the growth corridors lie? And as Raghu is saying, the services and things of that sort, they have to come up first, and then the city would. And this is something which is important, is not happening at the moment. And this is the direction where Hyderabad should go, which they used to do in the past.
Can I just add
Wonderful.
one more thing?
Yes, please.
See, one thing we noticed during our interactions there with various stakeholders when we were doing the study, but both of us come from IDFC background, we have some policy infrastructure background, and now, I mean, we worked in the various universities elsewhere, and we also practice directly. What we notice now is that in terms of the government ecosystem, in terms of getting the data, using the data to analyze, understanding the trends, which the international cities do, and that I think is lacking. At least I can't speak of. I worked with Bangalore quite a lot, and of course in Hyderabad when we saw this particular thing. Just the question of how do you collect your data, look at the trends, what is happening. I'm not speaking only statistical trends. go deep into the numbers to see what's happening. And then with all the tools, they simply don't have the ability to build that knowledge. That is a kind of differentiating factor for the international cities now. You take a Melbourne, you take a Singapore, or you take some of the US-based cities. The way the city governance now is extremely data-driven, and you take a lot of help from experts. And again, not in a negative sense. It's not just to double guess what government is doing, but essentially to try and help give the insights on what actually the past is telling us, and look at the examples elsewhere and what kind of patterns are available. That's one area which I think is kind of missing, which I think every other city in India must also be in the same way. We did so many schemes. We have smart cities, we have so many things, and so much data centers are there. But where is it actually being applied in terms of the action on the ground, in terms using data? I think that's where I think is a issue, because we come from a real estate background. We also see the visual outlay, what happens on the road. So that can be changed with policy. So that kind of bringing together a bit of academic intellectual thinking, or a think tank like Infravision or someone, and those elements getting into policy making, which can move on. I think that's the area where the cities kind of lack today. And Hyderabad, definitely, we struggle to get the data. That's why if you read the report, we did a lot of internet scraping, trying to match different things. But if they had the data set which was available, it was straightforward to do all this analysis. The analysis could have been more richer.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. And, we'll meet again. There's so much to talk about, not just about Hyderabad, but about the other cities as well, and the lessons that we can learn from there. Thank you so much, both of you.